Okay, everybody, I'm delighted to officially hand over to our guest speaker this evening, Ian. I'll let Ian do a little bit of an intro. I know he introduced himself at the beginning of the call to those of you that joined nice and promptly, but Ian, would you like to say a little bit about who you are before we dive into the content?
Okay, I'm Ian. I live in Aston Clinton. I opened my garden for the church yesterday. I think my main claim to fame and funding is that I'm Scottish. I'm a man of meager talents, but chasing money is one that I do like to do. So I've kind of fallen into this. And I'm really going to take you through the key points that you need to bear in mind when you're funding. It will make your life easier, it will reduce your work, it will get you more cash. Now, the resource pack, Charity Excellence has a huge resource base, part of which has been written by myself. And what I've done is I've dropped everything from here into the resource pack. So don't bother about taking notes or anything like that. I hate it, because I can never pick up the key points and then I can't read my own writing anyway. So in the resource pack, when it talks about things like how to write a case for support, actually you will get much, much better out of the resource pack, and it will give you everything you need, so you don't need to worry about it. So if I crack on, what we're going to talk about: get the basics right, make a compelling case. People give money to people. They will give you money because of the difference that they want to see, and therefore you've got to get that compelling case that shows them that. And how do you do that? Case for support. And then, of course, you have to find enough of the right funders. So first one is getting the basics right. If you don't get them, you don't get any funding. It's that simple. We used to get all sorts of applications. I've had applications from Uganda, I've had applications from Scotland. We're AVCT, we make absolutely clear to people that we only fund people living in Aylesbury Vale. If you don't live in Aylesbury Vale, don't bother writing to AVCT. And what you're doing is you're giving people extra stuff to do, and you're wasting your time, because funding's really tight. They're not going to fund people outside their priorities. So this is the key one you want to focus on. It's not about what we want. That's got nothing to do with it. It's about what the funder wants and what your beneficiaries need. So when you read your bid, that's what you should see: responding to what the funder says is important to them and delivering for your beneficiaries. So how do we go about that? Well, first thing I do is check the funder's website to ensure your bid fits with what they want. So if they say we only fund in Scotland, or we only fund in Aylesbury Vale, or we only fund sport and leisure, work out what it is they want, see if you fit with them. And if possible, engage them, phone or email or anything like that. Many of the funders, particularly the big ones, won't even speak to you. That's just how it is, but there are those that will. And when you speak to them, they've got you flagged in their mind, and you can talk about your project, and they may say, well, we like your project, but we're really focused on this, or we're not funding those things at the moment. And that's giving you really valuable information, because you can then tweak your funding bid so you've got a better fit. And if they have a board meeting and the guy that's been coordinating the applications comes in and says, oh yeah, you like this, oh by the way, you like this one from these guys in Aylesbury, you've got the board's attention. That really, really makes a difference. And if you're not successful, not all of them, certainly when I was at ABCT, we always gave people feedback. And if you take that feedback, that will help you with your next bid. So that's the way to look at it. So how do you meet their requirements? You've met their eligibility criteria. It's only small charities. It's only for Bain charities. We only fund for sport. We only fund in Aylesbury Vale. Whatever they say those criteria are, you need to fit within them. There's huge demands for funding bids. If you don't fit the criteria, you won't even get looked at. And instructions, make easy for them. You want them to like you. So they may say online, I came out with one this week, the Fit and Trust perfect charitable general funder for small charities, they only accept it on letters. Some of them still do that. Include all the information they ask for. Because if I am a funder and I say, I want A, B, and C, if you only give me A and B, I haven't got all the information I want to make a decision. Therefore, your case will automatically be weaker. So if they ask you for specifics, give them to them. There may be deadlines. Some only meet once a year. Some will accept them at any time. They may have specific word counts, people like the lottery, and they may give you guidance on attachments. So if they say, you know, we welcome an attachment, if you've got a great impact report or a leaflet or something like that, that can always help. So really make sure that you're giving them what they want. And a compelling case. Quality bids always mattered, and it matters a great deal more now. I tend to compare it with job applications. I spoke to one guy and he said, this is outrageous. We've submitted 200 bids. We haven't got a single fund. And I said, did you take a standard application and just email it to everybody? And he went, yeah. And I went, well, there you go. You're not going to get anywhere. If you're applying for a job and you just bash out 200 CVs to everybody in Google and who else, you're not likely to get an interview. So what do you want to do? So what you want to do is have a look for those companies who are interested in your skills and abilities. And then you want to kind of tailor your CV for the things that they think are important to them. And then you get the interview. Well, funding bids are very much the same. You want to get yourself in front of them. So don't bash bids out to every single one you see. Think about the ones that matter for you. And I will talk through how you can do that. And you've made your case well. A thing to bear in mind is I get things landing on my desk to go through a funding bid. And often the people reading your funding bids have got no idea what you do or who you are. So you need to, in a very short period of time, convince them why you should be giving this funding. Facts, figures, arguments. I was dealing with a bunch of guys in Tottenham running a mosque and a madrasa. And they said, you know, we need funding. We make grants to people in the local community, and it's really, really important we do that. And I just had a quick look. You can find all sorts of stuff. If you're doing food, you can do how bad is the food bank crisis. You can get really good facts and figures. You can go to the local council. What I did at Tottenham is I just Googled it in Tottenham, and here was a report by the local authority, and what they were saying is, you know, we're one of the 7th poorest boroughs in London. We've got very high level of ethnic minority population, and the young people are increasingly at risk of employment and becoming disenfranchised. You just put that into your bid. The reason we need funding, you know, there's huge amounts of poverty in London. We are the 7th worst out of about 40 or something. And it particularly affects our community. And people are going, I get it. I understand why it's important to fund you now. And why are you best placed to deliver that project or initiative? You know, we're Crisis. We're a really big charity, and we can do this and we can do that, and these little pipsqueak charities. But actually, the guys running the Mosque and Community Centre plugged into the community. They knew everyone. They knew what was happening in the local area. They individually knew people who were isolated, and they could speak and engage with their community in a way that a big charity never could. So why are you the best placed? It could be because of your location. It could be you've got particular skills. It could be your engagement with the community. Any of those reasons. What makes you the people they want to give this funding to? And always the urgency of the need. I run Charity Excellence. I can't get any grant funding at all. But it's really, really tough out there. And then people will look at my funding bid, and, you know, last year our charity supported 6 million beneficiaries. I can come out with all of that. And then they read the funding bid that say their kids going hungry on the estate. Well, who would you give your money to? So those things that are urgent and need to be now. Why is it urgent that you get this funding. And costs, always really boring. Nobody ever likes them, but actually really quite important to get right. So always try and include a share of overheads such as rent and insurance. Funders love projects. They do not like paying administration costs. But don't push it any more than a funder's likely to accept. That's often 10 or 15%. They may say, we just not accept any overheads. But if you can get overheads, that's in there. And it's actually quite important to be sure that you've captured all your costs. And I've often sat with small charities and we've got our project and it costs £3,000. And I say, okay, so if you're having an event, are you going to hire a marquee or equipment? Do you need to pay for the sports field or the hall? Are you going to need produce posters or leaflets to get them out to people? What about travel costs? Are you going to have travel costs? You need to hire a van to take stuff there. And they go, oh, yeah. And then you add it all up and you find out that the £3,000 project is actually £3,500. If you get the £3,000 grant, they're going to expect you to deliver it, but you're missing 500 quid. So costings. No, you don't need to become an accountant. Just be sure you've captured your costs and if possible, get some kind of margin for your overheads in there. And it will engage the funder. I remember one, we got it from a local group in Aylesbury. It was awful. I mean, as a project bid, it was just, wah. But there was one line in there and it was about a little girl in the local area and the situation she'd been in. And what they did that made her life completely different. And I said to the board sec, I said, we can't fund this. This is not workable. They don't know what they're doing. I said, but what I want you to do is I want you to go back to that group and I want you to work with that group and I want you to bring back a really top, sensible, practical project plan. And when you've done that, we will give them the money. Because I'm not, to me, it was important the projects worked, but why were we making this money available? And it's because we wanted to change the lives of people in Aylesburyville. That was the ultimate driver behind what AVCT did. And that one line was enough to get me. So you really want to engage your funder. How are you going to do that? Short, clear, understood by everyone reading it. If you say the BBC, everybody gets it. One I usually chuck out to people is EFAR, and that's extended field anomaly relaxation. It is a technique for long-term strategic forecasting of scenarios, etc. It's utterly meaningless to anyone who's not involved in that kind of strategic modeling. And you may be doing things where you use acronyms and expressions that everyone around the table knows, but when you send your bid off to someone who's never been involved with you, they get confused. So really short and clear. I often no more than a couple of pages. You know, a big lottery bid can run to pages and pages and pages, but generally a couple of pages is fine. And it's jargon free with acronyms, easily understandable and explained. So when someone who doesn't know about you reads it, they go, I understand this. And the reason for keeping it short is more is not more. I would read things on a Sunday afternoon and the sun's shining and I think I could be in the garden, and I'd have 15 funding bids to read. And you're number 15 and you've sent me 12 pages. And, you know, I would always read them, but I'm plowing my way through these 12 pages. If you have 4 key points you want to get over to me in that dozen pages, I may well miss them. You want the reader to read it, put it down and go, the key points in this bid are this, 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 and this. You want them to get that really clearly, and keeping it short and focused is that way. And emotionally engaging. You know, people give to people. And what they want to know is that the funding they give you will make a difference to an issue that matters to them. And that's where I'm coming from when I say it's not about you, it's about what the change the funder wants to see and the change that will deliver in your beneficiaries. And if you take something like that little girl in the bid I read, I wanted to see a change in the lives of disadvantaged people in Aylesbury, and that group was absolutely nailed it with her. That was me. That was good enough. That's what you need to do. So why bother funding small charities? Everybody knows you're chaotic. Working with small charities and community groups is like herding cats. And you have not got professional finance people, you haven't got professional marketing people, you haven't got experts in project and program delivery. So clearly the best thing to do is to give the money to big charities because they'll use it properly. Yeah, right. What you have, and I honestly don't hear this argument at sector level at all, you deliver value for money in a way that nobody else can. What percentage of your budget is staff costs varies, depends on the organisation. It can be 80% is probably pretty normal. For some organisations, it can be 90%. So for every pound I give them, 90p goes on staff wages. But actually, with very small and volunteer-led charities, there is no staff cost. So when you give them a pound, the whole pound goes on delivery. So you may not be as economically to scale or as efficient as the big operators, but you have a massive delivery advantage. So investing in small charities delivers real value for money. Your pound goes where you want the pound to go. It doesn't go in the chief exec's pocket. Some of these big charities, there are chief executives on six-figure salaries, and somebody has to pay for them. So you're able to reach and engage communities in a way larger charities can. What I mean by that is, you know, they can come up with projects and program plans to go along and talk to people. I was delivering one for the BAME group, and I said, look, guys, if I walked onto your estate as the most competent and well-meaning charity person on earth, the young guys on the estate won't speak to me because I'm a white middle-aged bloke. Whereas there were a bunch of ladies I was dealing with, and I was helping out. They were women, they were mothers, they lived in the estate, they were working to get food for the kids on the estate that were going hungry. They knew everyone on the estate, they knew the families that were struggling, and those families would listen to them. If they knocked on the door would always be opened. They could reach people in a way that the larger charities simply could not, and there was a real reason for that. And often the communities that people work in can face multiple challenges and deprivation, and it may be that you can reach into those communities and understand them and work with them and help them in a way that other people simply cannot. And you're often very agile. There's no committees, or it's very informal. There are no formal operating procedures. To give you an example of that, at the height of COVID, everybody was totally desperate for grants. All the umbrella bodies and sector bodies were working to deliver solutions, and I kind of looked at it and went, what we need is a grant making database. So myself and half a dozen volunteers built one in 9 days over Easter 2020, and that was from scratch to launch. We just did it, and we just went, that needs to be done, and so we did it. In which case I obviously have to get the pitch in for Clare Foundation, because I phoned them up on a Sunday morning and went, I've got a marvelous plan to build a funding database for everyone. I haven't got any money to pay for the coding. Could you write me a check? And the answer was, well, if that's what you're going to do, you're right, I will write you a check. So the very famous Funding Finder database, the reason it happened in the first place is because of the Clare Foundation in Aylesbury were willing to pay for it on a Sunday morning, which I thought was really good. But it's that kind of thing. You know, if there are kids hungry on the estate, the ladies I spoke to, get some money, get some food, get it to the kids. No committee meetings, no processes, no discussions at board meetings, just go and do it. You're agile in a way that other organizations aren't. And these are the kind of arguments that you can deploy why you should be funded. So what do success rates? They depend on a huge amount of factors. If you're pussycats or donkey sanctuaries, everybody gives you money. And since COVID, there has very much been a switch to frontline vulnerable people, isolation, food banks. That's very much changed. The BAME community is now much more to the fore. When I built the funding database, I chose funding categories for the people I thought got shoved to the back of the queue far too often. Women's groups, food banks, the BAME community, the LGBTI community, small community groups. And the night before launch, I instructed the software engineers to take the BAME community off simply because I couldn't find a single grant funder. There was nobody. When the impact of COVID on the minority communities became clear, when Black Lives Matter came very much to the forefront, suddenly all these funders exploded. And that's kind of, you know, something good coming from something terrible. So it depends on a whole load of things. Very crudely, if you've engaged your funder, the Warham, it was 1 in 3. If you just chuck a funding bid in, it was about 1 in 10. Those have got very much worse. It was much easier to raise funding during the height of COVID than it is now. It has actually got that serious. And two things from that. One is getting the quality bids pushes the odds in your favor. And the second one is you are not going to be writing one funding bid. You're going to be writing a number of funding bids. It will move chances in your favor, but how can you write loads of funding bids? Almost everybody's a volunteer. You're really busy. So how do we get around that? And the answer is a case for support. And basically, you can submit better bids far more quickly. Oops, didn't mean to do that. So why should you have one? It saves you time. When you're writing multiple bids, you can write them quicker. You will write better quality bids, and quality really matters now. So they always include your best arguments, the best facts, the best information. And the fundraisers won't talk about this one, but for me, better quality comms. When you work in a community, they will not give you any money. You have to engage them. They have to be engaged with what you're doing. And to engage people, you have to get your message over clearly and succinctly and with the best arguments. So if you're doing this, if people are going to be speaking, or you're doing things on social media, or you've got a website, or you're producing a leaflet, your case for support actually has everything you need. And so I go the extra mile with it, and I use it for wider engagement. So how do you do it? Succinct. Too much and they'll miss your key points, or they won't read it. So me on a Friday afternoon, you're number 12, you've sent me a 15-page essay, you've got 3 critical points you want to make, I'm tired, I want to go gardening, I may miss your points. So when someone reads it, they need to come out really clearly and well. Jargon-free, waffle, acronyms. I've had funding bids written by chief executives talking about blue sky thinking. Mate, I'm not interested in blue sky thinking. What I'm interested in is that little girl that got helped. That's what I'm interested in. Or they don't understand it. What may be common use in social services or in a community area or in youth work may not be understood by the people that are reading your grant. Make it nice and simple and urgent. Why is that funding needed now? There is huge competition. There are a vast number of deserving cases out there. They will give them to the most important and the most urgent. So where is the urgency? Why is what you're doing so important now? And emotionally engaging. The difference that you will make to people's lives. That's what the funder wants to hear. That's the thing that really makes a difference. And compelling. They get why it's really important to fund you. They should put your case down and go, we have to fund these guys. I hear about all the other urgent stuff, but these guys, we need to fund them. Is your case compelling? And it has to be convincing. You need to provide the facts and information. I'll often hear people say, we want to do this. It's really important that we do that. We absolutely have to organise this event. And I go, says who? Whereas, if you're the seventh most deprived borough in London, or if this is what's happening to young people, or around mental health, I was supporting a mental health charity, their waiting lists tripled in 6 months post-COVID. And when you're a funder and you read that, and what we effectively said in the funding bid, there are young people in their houses right now suffering from serious mental health issues, and we could really help them, but we haven't got the money to do it. So they're not getting any help. There's a real argument. Yeah, we need to do something about this. So what do you need in your core case? Background information. They just need to know the basics about you. And why then, what the need is and why addressing it is important and urgent. And how you meet the needs of your beneficiaries and the impact this will have on them. Running an event means nothing. If you run that event and that creates change in people's lives, they feel less isolated, or they've got new skills, or they've been brought back into the community, or it's reduced the risk of crime and poverty and homelessness. That's all really important and good stuff. And evidence of your work, facts, information, examples of recent successes. Now, I wrote one of these, the last one I wrote was a while ago now, was for a large Irish charity in London that I was the chief exec of. And it would start with the London Irish Centre, boom, 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 this is who we are, this is what we do. And we're dealing with drugs, homelessness, domestic abuse. This is the kind of things that we deal with. Why is it important and urgent? The Irish community in London is about 900,000. There are increasing numbers of Irish people ending up on the streets. People like older Irish women present late to the doctors. And if what you've got is cancer, your life chances are substantially reduced. There were lots of inequalities in there, and there were lots of people being lost. And how do we meet the needs of our beneficiaries? We were the hub and had always been seen as the focus for the Irish community. We had trained expert counsellors. We had network of signposting to help and resources. We could get emergency food grants or emergency accommodation to people really, really quick. We could be the difference between that young person ending up on the street and being sucked into the sex trade and alcohol and drugs. We could stop that happening. And evidence of our work. This is how many beneficiaries, this is the difference they made, this is the feedback that we got, these are the hard facts that show you that what we are telling you is true. It ran to about 5 pages. And what we would do is every time we got a grant bid, it could be for older women, right? That'll be about late presenting. It could be about homelessness. It could be about a drug addiction. It could be about young people or isolation, but we would actually just go into the case for support. We would take out the bits we needed, and then we would redraft those pasted bits to fit with that particular project. These are the deliverables, this is how much it costs. And what we could do is turn funding bids around very quickly, and they always had the best arguments, the best facts, the best quotes, because they were all in one single document. In my first chief exec role, in one afternoon, the fundraising manager and director turned out 34 funding bids. And this is how they did it. So finding funders, you have to find enough of them, but you need to find the right ones, not just anyone. So what's your choice? Generally, the accepted gold standard is Directory of Social Change, Funds Online. They got 4,500 trusts, and they'll take you for 400 quid a year in license. If you're up in London, you can visit their office and get on for free. Only time I've ever used them, so that's the only time I've ever seen it. I'm Scottish. It's an ethnic thing. I'm just like really mean. So when it's free, I'm up for it. But for the professional fundraisers, this tends to be seen as the go-to one. You can then step down a bit to guys like Grants Online. 5,000 funding schemes, they say the cost has come down to about 100 quid. Probably pretty good for most people if you can afford it. My Funding Central is free to groups under 30k. After that, it gets much more expensive. And I don't absolutely know, but my guessing is the quality goes every time the price goes down. Oops. At Grantway, I had a very interesting conversation with the managing director. A bunch of Norwegians. And they've launched Grantway. It's very, very new. That's a link if you want to go there. And it's completely free. It runs on ads. So you'll be working away. You'll get an ad for Nike sports shoes or something. But effectively, it's only England. This is literally just launched. But they are going to roll out other across, I think, by the end of June across the summer. So by the time you hit the autumn, they will cover all the grants. And they have exactly the same information and functionality as the ones you pay for. I'm Scottish. I just like free. If I was one of the other funding databases, I'd be a tad worried at the moment. And then, of course, the best of them is Funding Finder. Built by me, so I would say that. Completely free. And when I built it, the big databases charge, and the only people with money are the bigger charities. So the databases are really designed with them in mind, and they're really designed for professional fundraisers. But the very small groups, they don't need these reams of things. And for people like the BAME community, there was no such search. I mean, someone might have added it now, but there certainly wasn't when I did it. People like the LGBTIQ plus community, there were no search categories. So when I built this, it was like I blagged the money off Claire. It's my database. I can do what I damn well like with it. So my search categories were all the people I thought got shoved to the end of the queue. So there's one for small charities and community groups, one for the BAME community, food banks, LGBTIQ plus community, disability community, and women's groups. So there are specific funders, search categories dedicated to you. I've also created 50 funder lists. A lot of people are not totally comfortable with databases. So I create funder lists that basically do the work for you. They're not as good as the database, but they're much easier to use if that's not your kind of thing. And the other thing it does is it connects to databases and online funder lists globally. So Funding Finder can reach 100,000, but it'll also do things like it's got there's a category for hate crime. If you want to do research on hate crime, it's actually quite difficult because there are no specific categories. But Inclusion London presumably paid a professional fundraiser to do it, and they put it online, and I found it. So if you're looking for funding to challenge hate crime, actually the system will send you direct to someone who's done all the work for you. So it's intended to make things easier. It's got a lot less information than the other ones. So Funding Finder is very much designed for small groups like you because that's what it was built for. Grantway has a lot more information on each funder. So I don't actually see us as competitors, and actually the two of us at a meeting, we agreed we weren't competitors, but potentially join both of them, get the best of both worlds, and both of them are completely free. If I got time at the end, I can show you. So how do you find funders? You want the right funders, not just any. So your size, There are many funders out there who will either prioritize small charities or will only fund small charities. And also think about the difference you make. So if I give you an example, I'll go through it first, but the difference you may make may be mental health. So there may be mental health charities or charities specifically won't fund loneliness. And it's also about who you help: older people, younger people, the BAME community. Those individuals, there are funders for older people and funders for younger people. So actually there's another group of funders you can think about. And the better the fit with the funder, the more chance you have of success. So if you can tick lots of those boxes, you're going to be really, really attractive. And so if I give you an example how that works in practice, I was talking to a Black group in London, and what they were doing was getting all the older people in the community together in the local community centre every Sunday afternoon. They would they'd have patties, they'd get some reggae on, they had a couple of laptops and computers there, and they could either Skype or Zoom with the nephews and grandkids wherever they were all over the world, be that Manchester or, you know, Jamaica. And it was great. And they said, oh, yes, we get the old folks together. And I said, mate, nobody's going to fund you to get the old folks together. It just sounds nice. I said, but listen, what you're actually doing is you really understand your community. You are able to reach out to the most isolated people who won't necessarily be able to reach out for help, who are probably not getting the benefits they're entitled to because they're not able to speak to anyone about that. And what you're actually doing is reconnecting people with their culture. You're bringing them together to be part of that wider community. You're alleviating loneliness. You're having a profound impact. I said there will be people at your event who may not speak to anyone for the rest of the week. They may not have enough money to buy food because they're not aware of the various allowances and benefits that they are entitled to and should be claiming. That's what you're doing. You're making a huge difference to their lives. So when you go out and look for funding, you could go to a small charity funder. You could go to a funder to the BAME community. You could go to a funder who actually works with older people. You could go to a funder who's tackling isolation and loneliness. You could even go to a tech funder to get those laptops and Zoom things. And so there's a whole series of funders. But if you can put them all together, and what I said to them is well, actually, you need core funding. Lloyds Bank Foundation particularly focus on small charities and have promised to commit a third of their funding to the BAME community. And they're really interested in people that are tackling social exclusion and social welfare issues. And you tick every box. You really need to speak to these guys. I mean, they've only got about 60 million a year or so. And I reckon they could probably fit you in somewhere. And can you see how all that is brought together? And that suddenly Lloyds Bank are absolutely at the front of your agenda, because you're a perfect fit. You give them everything they're looking for. And if you don't get it from them, you can go to a whole host of other funders. That's how you find your funders. So get the basics right. If they say we will fund X and you're not X, don't waste your time applying. Submit a compelling bid. There is a huge amount of competition and quality always matters. People give to people. Convince them why what matters to them, and you are the people to do it. And creating a case for support helps. Your bids are more effective, they're quicker to write, and you can use them for all sorts of stuff like social media and stuff like that. And then find enough of the right funders for you. Now, how are we time-wise?
So we're at 6:15. So we've got about 15 minutes.
Do you want to do questions, or do you want to see grant databases?
So should we have a show of hands? So can you find your reactions button, and can you give us a thumbs up if you would like to move to questions, or a heart button if you'd like to move to a demonstration of a funding platform. Okay, we've got 8 votes in so far. 7 are hearts, so
Okay.
that would be the second of the 2 options, Ian.
That kind of right. This is my funding central. The only reason I'm showing you this one is because I've got a free account. I'm not going to pay these guys for this stuff. And this is a classic funding database. This is what you would expect to get from most of them. So what you can do is you can select your type of organization. You can see.
I don't think we can see your screen yet, Ian, just to let you know. We can still see the PowerPoint presentation.
Oh, it's not shifting screens. Oh, they've changed the settings. Oh, give me strength. They keep changing everything. So what is your organization type? Okay, we're a community association. That'll do. Select your areas of work. And of course, it expands out. And there's all sorts in here. And you just tick whatever you takes your fancy. But you can see this for people, if you're not used to fundraising, you don't know how it works, if you're not really comfortable with tech, you can see it begins to get a bit more complicated. So we only want local funders, and we want them open for applications. You can do a keyword search, so you could do food funders in Aylesbury or something like that, and I run a search. And what it's done is it's brought up these funds for me. Active Withersea Get Going Community Fund tells me a bit about it, tells me the status, no deadlines, maximum value, and so I can then click through and it will give me a whole pile of stuff about it, eligibility, deadlines, and all that. That's pretty much what you get from all of the databases. That's what it looks like. So if you want to dig in, or if you want to investigate a particular funder, actually, this will give you loads of stuff. Funding Finder's not like that, because Funding Finder was built by me and I never do anything. This is Charity Excellence. This is the dashboard that tracks everything for you. You set it up. It's all terribly clever. You get questionnaires. You score the questionnaires, and then the system will create your dashboard and identify where you've got most opportunities. It will do fundraising, it will do communications and all sorts, and it builds the questionnaires around you. So you get exactly what you need. You're not getting a whole bunch of air, and everything is in very simple, plain English. And that means that anyone can use it. So you can score fundraising or communications. You don't need to know anything about either, but you're not interested in that. You can join. I've got a lovely quality mark. This is Funding Finder. And as you can see, it's a lot simpler. And I've deliberately done it that way. So what you can do is you can select where you want to be. We could try Bucks for the counties. Buckinghamshire has got more local funders than any other county in the UK, because I live here and I thought I should do a proper job. So these are all the funders in the local area. I like local funders. If you apply to a national grant, there are 500,000 non-profits to compete with. If you apply to a Bucks grant, there's only Bucks charities to compete with, so the competition's a lot less. So if you can get a good fit with a Bucks charity, that's rock and roll. Shout out for Heart of Bucks. Every county in the UK has its own community foundation. And effectively, it's a charity that exists to support other charities, and they give you money. I always like people that give me money, and a lot of them will actually give you funding support. Heart of Bucks are based not far from Aston Clinton, the next to Calibre Research Library. Well worth a stop by their website, and have a look and see if the kind of support that they provide would suit you. Great bunch of people. Everything's absolutely free. They're obviously not as good as the Clare Foundation, but they're close. So I can now expand this. I've got 75 funders, and I expand it to include England, and I've got 361, and I expand it to include UK wide, and I've got 1,225. And what the system will basically give you is a little bit about each funder. Is it a small charity? How much? How often? Is just the basics of what you need. So you go and have a look at them. So if you say, I'm liking the look of the Blakemore Foundation, you click it and it will take you to their website. And then you can have a look at the Blakemore Foundation. That's fundamentally how it works. You can see it's got much less detail, but you can get through it a lot quicker. But what it does that is different, I update it every week because I'm a sad man. And so if you run a search, it will give you all of the very latest funders that I've uploaded. It's about 50 a month. So if some people log in weekly or you log in monthly, where are all the new funders that are in recent editions? And this is what does make it different. So here are categories: the BAME community, the disabled community, there's faith groups. So if I run it for the BAME community, I've got 120 entries. That's funders that are either specific to them, or that's funders who will prioritize them because they think that the BAME community is underserved. They're bloody right. But they have made a commitment to put extra. So this is actually better for you. If you're not one of the smaller groups that I've mentioned, I also have one for small charities and community groups. Now, for me, that is either they only fund small charities and community groups, they prioritize small charities and community groups, or I've had a look at it and gone, that's a cracking little fund for a small charity or community group, and I've added it. That's got 286. So if you want to match them off, and you say, well, actually, we're working in social welfare and we're a small charity, and you match them off, it will give you funders, and these funders all fund small charities and community groups and all fund social welfare. So you've got a much tighter fit. But you can see the system is a lot simpler. You can actually run searches on the Charity Commission database. It's public sector. It's horribly bloody clunky. But in actual fact, you can run those and they're all completely free. But you do need to put a little bit more time and effort in because it is not the world's most helpful piece of kit. And that's effectively what funding databases look like. And I'll shut up now.
Thank you, Ian. Give you a second to rest your voice. So I haven't seen any questions as such come into the chat. I've seen a few comments and I know a couple of people have had to duck out early, but thanked you for all the information, people telling us that it was useful. So yeah, last message from Laura, children are entering. Yeah, dipping out at this point. But does anyone have...
Been there and done that. Absolutely. Laura, you have my sympathy, wherever you are.
I'm fortunate my little girl's out at Brownies at the moment, so I've got a quiet household, hence why we schedule it early evening and not any later in the evening, because it does go a bit bonkers when they're tired, hungry and getting close to bedtime. Does anyone have any questions? You're welcome to pop a question into the chat or just type a Q, or you can use the raise hand function. I can see that Emma has popped her hand up. So Emma, would you like to take yourself off mute?
Thanks, Helen. Hi, Ian. That was really great, actually, really helpful. How do I get the funding finder? How do I get it? Do I just Google it?
You just go to Charity Excellence, and the resource pack has got all the links. And you go to Charity Excellence, you have to register. Yeah. But there's no fees or anything. Once you're into Charity Excellence, you just click the funding finder button. There's even a video that shows you how to use it. You have to listen to me for 3 minutes, but you've managed 50, so another 3 probably you could survive. And then you just help yourself.
That sounds great. I think I'll be doing that tonight. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I can say that I'm not brilliant with technology at times, and I'm a registered user, and I echo Ian's words that it is really easy and user friendly. We've got a question in the chat. Samaya, would you like to ask the question live?
Sure. Yes, sure, I can do once this is working now. Hi Ian again. I was on one of your calls last week, wasn't I? Yes. Again, really useful today. So at the moment, our community group is toying with the idea of becoming either a CIC or a CIO. And I just wondered, seeing as you know so much about funding opportunities, what you think in terms of how many opportunities there are for funding CICs versus CIOs, because I'm hearing different things from different people.
Right. I always say it depends on what your funding model is. So if fundraising is a nice to have, it'll be really helpful, but it's not critical. A CIC is a really nice, flexible and quick to set up. If you're totally dependent on fundraising, there is no question that a charity is a better vehicle for you. There are a number of reasons for that. The first one is funders will decide who they want to fund. Traditionally, it's been registered charities. That's actually changed quite a lot. It's now much better. And some of the very biggest funders will be quite happy to fund the CIC. The Lottery, Arts Council England, Sport England, they will all quite happily fund CIC. So it's much more open than it used to be, but there are still more funders will fund the charity. Second one is, if you're looking for corporate support from companies and businesses, if they donate to a charity, they can write it off as an operating expense and they deduct 20% corporation tax. So there are financial benefits to them in supporting a charity rather than the CIC. And the final one is personal donations from UK taxpayers. If I give your CIC £1, you get £1. If I give your charity £1, you get £1 from me and you get another 25p from HMRC. So when I talked to a lady who was moving into the mental health field, it was around contracts with the council and companies and things. And she wasn't going to be getting individual donors. And actually she said, yeah, grants would be fantastic, but they're not really where we work. And she went for a CIC. And I spoke to someone else, and he'd been running, his dad set up a charity in the local Muslim community, and he just ran it for years. And Osman took it over and he built it up, and he was a businessman, and he was looking, there's got to be a better way to do this. And he said, look, I got buckets of zakat. I get people turning up at the door and giving me a check for £500. And I said, Osman, you need to be a charity. Because if you add 25% to your zakat, that's an awful lot of money and you're missing out on it. Becoming a charity is an absolute pain in the backside. It is. But actually, in that situation, clearly it was much better for him to be a charity. And I know when I had, with some Muslim groups, the 100% zakat donation, and I was working with a surgeon and he said, no, I'm not having any costs. I will pay for everything. If I get £1, the £1's going to widows and orphans. I said, but you can't expand because there's costs in doing this. I said, tell you what, if you register with HMRC and you get the 25% gift aid, if you use the gift aid for the websites and all the other bits that come with it, but everyone's £1 goes to a poor person, would you feel okay about that? And he went, yeah. If I'm spending the tax office's money on the website, I'm happy as long as my donations are going. And that was a way he felt able to give all of the donations to poor people.
That's really useful, Ian. Thank you. And thanks, Jackie. It's useful to know that other people are going through the CIO process too. It's quite daunting.
Yes. You have to grind your teeth and keep going.
Well, we've been actually signposted to an organisation called Participate in Shipley, which is in Bradford, who apparently are a charity who helped set up other charities.
Oh, right.
So they do most of the legwork for you, apparently. So that's going to be one of our next port of calls if we do that. But I think we're still debating about whether it's CIC or CIO, and it's such a difficult decision to make.
Well, did you get the resource pack from the non-profit funding?
That wasn't the one that I attended with you last week, was it? Was that a different one?
It'll
be on the Charity Excellence website, won't it?
Wait a sec.
Sorry, everybody, if you've got another question. I do apologise for monopolising Ian.
No, I think it's useful.
Fab. As long as it's useful for everyone.
Right, where's chat? Sorry. Right, that's my guide.
Super.
And it gives you 6 questions to ask yourself. And depending on your answers to those questions, it will take you to the one you want.
Fabulous.
Now,
Thank you.
if they're going to do that for you, but they don't have things like policies, you're probably going to want something like maybe a safeguarding policy, a grant making policy. If you need any policies and haven't got them, if you email me, I will send them to you.
Fab. Thank you. I'm sure you'll be hearing from me again soon. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. Thanks, Ian.
So we've had a couple of comments from Jackie and from the representative from NCBRS, just saying that they've both applied and become a CIO and haven't found it too difficult. I wondered, Ian, if you wanted to sort of put it in context, because it's the difference between you know, a few minutes in the sense of a CIC, isn't it? And quite or potentially quite a lengthy process for the Charity Commission, although it doesn't always take this long. But do you want to comment on sort of the average time an application might take with Charity Commission?
CIC, you go online, they want loads of information like names and addresses and telephone numbers. It's a couple of hours work. You usually get a response in 4 days, give or take, and it will be approved. With the Charity Commission, there are 30 screens to complete at least, and then you have to upload all the supporting stuff. So there's a lot more admin to it. The Commission are extremely slow, and they refuse. Their annual report said 49% of applications last year were refused. They will often come back with reams of questions, and sometimes you have to have an argument. I once got a charity registered in 1 day. It was for nurses during COVID. The average seems to be about 3 months. The longest I had was for my own charity, Charity Excellence. That was 23 months. And in the end, I threw my toys out the cot and I took them to the first tier tribunal and I put them in front of a judge, at which point they caved in and registered the charity. So it's a bit of a lottery. But what I will say is if you're nice and really simple, then actually you just grit your teeth and fill it in. Flashpoints for them, funny objects. If you're doing anything out of the normal, if you're into things like complementary therapies, they'll get a bit hissy and stressy about that. If there are any conflicts of interest, that is, if trustees or people who are going to be employed, if the trustees are going to be paid, so if the founder will become the chief executive, if they're perhaps buying training services from a trustee, you can do all of that stuff. It all begins to get a bit more complex. Any links to non-charitable bodies. So if you're being set up by a commercial company, or you have links to a commercial company, or you have links to an overseas NGO, they will get very interested in that. And the final one is international NGOs. They can pay a great deal of attention to, particularly if you're operating in some of the most troubled areas like Yemen or Somalia or places like that. So, you know, if you've got conflicts of interest and you're working in Somalia and you're connected to a commercial company and you're working with a Somali NGO, you will get gone over like nothing. So that's a kind of feel for it, but it is a bit of a lottery. But
good to hear that a few people have negotiated it, you know, without too much trouble. It does happen, but like you say, 49%, you know, turned down at first attempt is quite a high figure, isn't it? So
they say they're being robust. I think they're just being ridiculous. But what I always say to people is grit your teeth and keep going. I have never failed to register a charity yet. I'm not particularly clever. I just absolutely refuse to give up. So if you grit your teeth and keep going, you will get your charity registered. I think where I'm coming from is if actually all those fundraising benefits, they can be huge, but if they're not huge for you, why would you go through all that pain?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's good advice. And I know there are other people on the call that we've had a similar chat, haven't we, about which of the two would better suit the model that you're going with. So yeah, it really does come down to what you're trying to achieve and where you believe your funding is going to come from. I'm very conscious of the time because we were billed to wrap up at 6:30. Ian has very kindly said that he's available. So if we do have further questions and you do want to sort of grab his time now whilst we have him with us, this, we're happy to stay on a little bit longer. But for those of you who are just thinking, oh, I'm sure it was supposed to wrap up at 6:30, I wanted to give you the opportunity, if you do need to drop off and be elsewhere, of course, that's absolutely fine. And we will make the recording available to everybody. As I say, that should come out to you on email by the end of this week. And following the session tonight, I will send you the resource pack and the slide deck so that you have that to refer to straight away. So does anyone else have any questions? Do feel free to physically wave if you're on camera, or use the raise hand function if you'd like to. I can't see anybody. Forgive me if I'm not seeing it. Oh, no, Evelyn, are you?
That looks a bit like it's a sunny evening and I want my tea.
I wasn't sure then if Evelyn was asking a question.
No, good.
Oh, it's the cat.
I've had a cat jump on me and jump off, so apologies for that. I think he wants his tea, actually.
Yeah, the cat wants to know.
Yeah,
not about where the money's coming from, but where the food's coming from.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, if nobody does have any further questions, I'm very happy to wrap tonight's session up. Thank you to Ian, obviously, for giving his time and for answering those questions there at the end. Thank you to you for joining us and giving up a sunny hour of the evening. And as I say, look out for the email, which will be coming later on tonight, and then the further one later this week with the link to the recording. We look forward to welcoming you to another event soon. I will very quickly give a shameless plug for an event that we're running tomorrow. So we have a workshop tomorrow morning being delivered online at 11 AM, and that's looking at how we can use software that we might already have to help us be more productive. And so it's talking about automation in the context of charity and business. So the Clare Foundation work not only with charities but also with business. So we have that workshop tomorrow. So if you are interested, I will pop our website address in the chat. You're very welcome to take a look at that. So what we're doing is we're taking a look at Microsoft Office 365 as our example, and we'll be learning some tips and tricks for how to get more out of it. That's all available free of charge that perhaps you're not aware of. So automating certain things in email, for example, so that you can be more productive and effective with your time. So if that's of interest, do take a look. I've dropped our events webpage into the chat. But if that's okay with everybody, I will leave it there for tonight. So thank you very much for joining us, and I'll end the recording now. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you. Bye.